Tonight,
Hey there, SkepticalRoot. I want to continue today with my discussion from last time regarding statistical error propensity and the left-right political spectrum. Last video I talked about the left and their propensity towards type 1 errors. Today I want to talk about the right and its tendency to favor type 2 errors, which are false negatives. So, as a counterbalance to the left, where they tend to favor agency, the right tends to favor non-agency, I guess, is the way to put it. It focuses itself more on individualism and individual outcomes and experiences. They tend to take more risks because regardless of looking at the way things work or the statistical information you might have available, these bad things don't happen to me. I am an outlier. I am an individual. I am not part of this collective group which can cause this particular thing. An example would be, you see the memes on Facebook, or typically on Facebook, sometimes on Twitter, but usually Facebook. When I was a kid, we drank from the hose and rode around the back of pickup trucks and et cetera, et cetera. They equate their personal experience of not having died in an accident in that pickup truck, the back of that pickup truck, to that being safe. Statistically, that's not safe. The kids that died aren't around now to say, yeah, it was okay for us. So they fall outside of this mean of this is okay, this is not okay, because it hasn't happened to us. Individually, it's not my problem, if you will. While the left has a tendency to favor agency, the right tends to favor principle. And this goes back to the right favoring a type 2 error. The idea behind principle is that all actors in the game play by the same rules. Principles become not only more important, but the most important thing that can go on in society and in social interactions. Everyone behaving according to principle means that we all have the same rights, freedoms, abilities, etc. And anybody who wants to do more or have more than that needs to do the hard work to achieve that. Those that don't do the hard work, or those that don't make it, must have done so because they did not put in the hard work. That principle of hard work is what's important. Just like the principle of freedom. A perfect example is with like free speech. This is typically considered a right-wing principle. When you see articles online, especially in this current political environment, talking about free speech, it's quite often when it's against free speech, or it's favoring a side that is not in favor of the free speech that's occurring, or people who are hosting the free speech rallies or whatever. There is most definitely these people are on the right, because freedom of speech is a principle. It doesn't have an idea or an agency behind it. It is a principle. And principles lend themselves to type 2 statistical error types. And they favor people who fall on the right hand of the political spectrum. These principles allow everyone involved, in the case of the political right here, to have the same framework in which to live their life and in which the world should function. There is less concern, too, for feelings, because feelings are things that happen to agents and individuals, and not necessarily individuals, because the only thing that I can be assured of is my agency. They are less concerned with feeling, because the feelings, first off, aren't mine, and secondly, feelings aren't principles. So how you feel about something is less relevant to what I'm doing or what I'm saying, because there is no objective version of it. We can't say that it's bad because it makes you feel bad. We have to say it's bad because of insert criteria. And these principles tend to not be subjective. There's less wiggle room in these ideas. It's much, much more based in principle. Getting into the far right, you run into more of the rugged individualist type, who live strictly and solely by principle. It is this principle, and it must be this principle, and only this principle, and everyone has to follow this principle. Everyone must adhere to the principle, or everything breaks down. We get to this point where we tend not to see things, anything, as people being anything other than a means to an end, because agency is only personal. This is almost very solipsistic. The world only exists as far as I'm concerned. And if it falls outside of my concerns, which includes people, that they don't matter. Large groups of people, in reference to how the right considers them, large groups of people tend to be divided by principle and not by actions or things like that. You'll see things like immigrants. Immigrants are illegals. They are people who have come here and violated some principle to get here. They're not starting off on level footing with everybody else because they've cheated the system. And that cheating is a violation of principle. Muslims and terrorists, and you tend to see these people grouped together, but they're grouped together based on principle. These crazy libtards is another thing you'll see. But it's because it is the principles that they espouse that are the problem. It's not the people, because they're not people at that point. As a group, they are a group that is tied together by a principle and not by an agency or a shared idea, but by a shared principle. And that's one of the main differences here, is where the left tends to favor agency and people coming together under an idea. The right tends to, both their in-group and their out-groups are based on principles. If you talk to them and you listen to how they use words, you'll find that quite often the left is talking about these people with these ideas are bad. And on the right, you're talking about the people who do these things are bad. They are people who are violating principal tenets of their belief, which is also where you have a strong support on religion on the right. But it's religion for the specific principles, and that's not the religion of the agency of God, for example. My experience in talking with people who are religious on both the right and the left, you'll find that people on the right talk about the loving God and the one who tells us to take care of our neighbors and things like that. But on the right, you'll talk about the moral God, the God who gives us laws and order and rules and principles to live by. And that's where you find this kind of overlap in the two categories, where you have people who are honestly religious on both sides. Now, I will say that people who are truly on the right, people who favor more often the tendency to favor a false negative in their thinking, I honestly think that a lot of them don't actually believe in a creator God per se. They're probably more deistic. There are the rules that are set out, but I don't know that they necessarily believe that there is a God and there is someone watching over them. And you can tell this typically because with the scandals and corruptions that tend to fall in the American Republican Party, they tend to be violations of these principles, the same principles that they espouse. But in all honesty, if they honestly believed that there was a God up there, and this is something where the difference in the religious on the right and the religious on the left fall. I know my hands are doing the different. It's never mind. My right, my left. Those on the right that violate these principles, honestly think they're getting away with it. You see the people who are, the typical anti-gay bigot congressman or whatever who gets, involved in a scandal with drugs and male prostitutes, something like that. I mean, that's not too far off from actual scandals. It's their violation of principle that bothers them. If they honestly believed that there was a God up there that was watching over them, they wouldn't be doing that stuff. God doesn't have an agency. God has principles that he's laid down, and that we need to follow those principles. And they believe that they should follow these principles laid down by God because those principles make sense and they're beneficial. You tend to not see that on the left. On the left, when you have politicians that get in trouble or whatever, because their principles are different, their ideas are different. They don't necessarily have the same principles per se. They understand. There's this understanding as well that it's fuzzier logic. It's more subjective. When they get caught in scandals, they tend to be individual things. They're not a violation. They're not. You're not going to have Anthony Weiner going out there and talking about how bad it is to sex with underage girls, and then have him get caught like that. What you'll have him talk about is how that type of stuff isn't all that bad. You know, it's not whatever. Because he's not going to come out as a violation of this principle. He may do something illegal or wrong, morally or ethically wrong, but he's not going to come out in violation of one of his principles because he's not about principles. He's about ideology. Take a look at the news, see how those different scandals fall out there, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I will say, too, that, and this is something that I'm going to address in the next video about the right, is that conspiracy theorists tend to fall on the right-hand side, the wacky conspiracy theorists. But there's a reason for that, and conspiracy theories tend to actually be type 1 errors. But we'll talk about that and how that differs from the crazy leftists who Antifa and the anti-big government, military industrial complex people on the left, in the third video at least. That is on my list of things to talk about, but my next video will talk about some of these contradictions, the religion being a product of the agency type of religion coming from the left, and the principle type coming from the right, and how it's not that unsurprising, or how it shouldn't be that surprising, I should say. But also talking about how where else you can see these broader trends fall into place, and kind of where I came up with this stuff. I'll have some charts and graphs that I'll probably throw up right in here somewhere, if I figure out how to do that. I haven't even tried to play with that yet, but that's it. So that's it for part 2. As I said, part 3 coming up, which will talk a little more about the potential contradictions, how I mentally resolve them, along with some supporting evidence, including some charts and graphs. So thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Tell me if you think I'm crazy or not yet, but we'll go from there. So, goodbye and hello, as always.
If it doesn't,